Okay, well, we have a few folks here, and it is the time.
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado, tonight we're gonna review a few things that have come out this past week, and then I received a few email questions that were specifically about staff and turnover and general sort of staff things at Great River. Thank you very much for the beverage. Water, everybody. Thank you.
Yes, water.
I think when they say 8 glasses a day, this does not count as a glass.
But
That's my guess.
This is a glass.
That would. Yes. Welcome everyone who is listening in. It is Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. 1/12/2021. Holly, welcome to the new year. Last week was quite a it was a specific and special forum. The next day was a I will say a notable day in the news and in our nation's political events. So I'll just cover for folks who didn't notice the family newsletter last week. A lot of information was in there. I'll make sure I cover that tonight also. And then for anyone, of course, who is here, we are so excited to have you here live. And if you'd like to ask a question, a few options, you can let us know with a chat or raise your hand that you're interested in speaking. And we're not giving prizes yet, but I'm almost on the edge of just personally funding prizes for anyone who will join Holly and I as guests. And then we're answering all the questions in the Q&A, and then of course any questions that had been sent, say to Holly or me or the office at email over the past week will be answered. And that's the agenda for this evening. And anything you want to talk about, Holly?
Oh, no, I was just listening to Congress, and so my mind is kind of.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And just for the record, everyone, I just put Holly completely on the spot. Usually that kind of segue between banter partners would be set up. Like I would say, prepare Holly for that moment. And I'm sorry, Holly, to put you on the spot.
I do the same to you, Sam. We're even.
It's true. It's true. In fact, let's just cheers to putting us on the spot. Okay, good. Well, without further ado, I don't see anybody with a hand up quite yet. I do see some folks coming on in the door, so to speak. I'll just remind folks the Q&A is down there on the bottom, and we'll accept questions there and also chat. We've got some chat active about prizes. So I'm going to screen share, and then Holly, I will need your help. Just making sure that the screen share is successful.
Beautiful.
And I think a fair number of people might be listening in to this later. So, oh, here we go. Good. I think this will work. So what we should be seeing now, Holly, if you can let me know if this is accurate, are 2 tables, percent positive by county, and then case rate per 10,000. You see that?
That's what I see, yes.
Miraculous. I'm going to slide it across my digital screen just to make sure I can see it. And Holly, let me know when it shows back up, because I'm sure it will pause while I'm moving.
Here, but only, wait. Oh, wait.
Is it back?
No, it was.
Okay.
No, now it's you.
We're going to do it again. We're just going to do it again. We're just going to fix it. Here we go.
Okay. There it is.
Okay, good. So, so the big news last week was that the state of Minnesota, for elementary schools specifically, said case rates per 10,000 is not the best data to use. I do want to acknowledge, though, that case rates per 10,000 is still a data point to use to understand prevalence in a generalized community. We look forward at school to receiving our COVID tests for our school site for our staff very soon, sometime this week. And I'll keep the whole public, all staff and all students and faculty and family members and anyone watching, we'll keep you all up to date on how that's looking from our school's angle. But something that we are also keeping our eye on are still for the 7 metro counties that are closest to our school. And again, since we're a charter school that draws from so many different locations, so many zip codes, over 63 zip codes enrolled, I believe, this year. We want to know what the positivity rate per tests are in these counties. And again, we want to see these down below 5% ideally. And so they still are between 5 and 10 here, it says. In some counties, though, they have dropped just a little bit, and we want to see these actually drop more. I would suspect a test or reporting delay between those holiday weeks. So we will look at that. And then looking down at the bottom of the screen that I'm sharing here, we do see that case rates are still high, though in many cases they have dropped below 50, and so now they range from 30 to 50, where again, just 2 reporting periods ago, we were looking at case rates that were near double or more of what they are now. Now, I will just be the first to say, I'm no epidemiologist, but this does not lead me to be overly idealistic or optimistic about the current state of affairs. As we learned last week, the state of Minnesota changed. And Holly, I just changed to a new tab. Can you see the benchmarks?
I see.
Oh, great.
Tiered benchmark.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, my internet, I cleaned out the internet pipes from where I'm coming. And so the info is flowing freely.
It's beautiful.
Like a river in the spring. In any case, here we go. So what we said last week is that the state, when they changed their health guidance for elementary school, specifically in our lower elementary, we're looking to set new reliable benchmarks in these areas of safety preparedness, staffing and readiness, the learning environments prepared, that the impact on families, that we're prepared to understand how it will impact students, and that we can confidently meet their educational needs in any changed model. And that's when we would begin rolling start to in-person learning. So we are still working on that internally. I will just be very clear. We've got lots of folks speaking up on all sides. I like it when people say all sides, so I see it's worked in my vocabulary. I would say this is less of a all sides of a single thing and more like a dodecahedron, bringing out your geometry and art teacher background. This is a many-sided topic, and I've gotten emails in the last 12 hours from people who say, hey, by the way, 6 weeks from right now is October 24th, which I know because someone in my life has a birthday the next day, and I got to plan 6 weeks ahead for that birthday. And I've had, emails in the last 12 hours that also say, advocate for kind of distance learning until everything is assured. And so there's a lot, and so we're balancing folks' needs. But when we set these benchmarks, we again are looking to set these benchmarks. And tonight I'm going to talk about what staff internally at the school have seen, what guidelines the school has set for all employees, and then we'll talk a little bit more generally too about what the data says about Great River employees versus education employees statewide and nationally. In any case, if you looked at our return website, Holly, do you see the return? Do you see the speedometer?
Beautiful speedometer.
Oh, great. So the speedometer here, I hope you, appreciate the specific emphasis on the syllable of speedometer, and that when we're trying to communicate generally about something that is frankly so complex, the speedometer is one easy way to say we're still really keeping an eye on case rates, and case rates are high, transition is high, so we're generally in distance learning with a restricted school resource center, student resource center, excuse me. And I just want to remind everyone that on this greatriverschool.org/return website, we do post the most recent community forum, and last week's community forum was a 90-minute fact fest. And so we actually broke that up too, though. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, you would see we broke that up into, I believe, a 10-minute summary, a 10-minute Q&A, extended Q&A, and then something specifically about the surveys. As I scroll down here, I just want to note to folks that when we talk about changing benchmarks, our speedometer is pretty detailed when you go down here related to cases per 10,000. And what we're working on internally is that the kind of criteria for our model would include these adjusted benchmarks. And so you would be able to look at our SRC models and possible future combination models and understand and be able to predict and know what's going to happen in the future based on our new benchmarks. We are focusing, again, just to remind everybody, on the lower elementary school resource center, student resource center, changing its criterion to allow more lower elementary students to join. And so if you've been at the Student Resource Center in the past as lower L student, you've received an email telling you what category you're in and when you can likely join. If you haven't been at the Student Resource Center before, in each Thursday family newsletter and on our school website here is the Student Resource Center form to sign up that you'd like to come. So we haven't changed the criteria yet for the upper L, lower adolescent, or upper adolescent Student Resource Center, but we're looking to modify that criteria, and we're really looking to hire staff to work at the lower elementary Student Resource Center. So not that this is a recruiting call, but if you're listening or watching, you know somebody who is interested in working on site with lower elementary and eventually older students too, but lower elementary students, we have that job posted, and please let folks know to apply. And so that's the quick rundown of school operation news, and really to understand that as I just go back one time to the benchmark. Holly, do you see the benchmarks?
I see them again, yes.
Okay, great. I don't know how I feel about the movement I'm doing, but I'm in a chair that slides, and so I'll just come right back in, and I'll say, when we set these benchmarks, I would appreciate if I were, say, a community member, a parent, a student, even a staff person, timelines for these benchmarks. And just as soon as we have a real handle on reliable information within each benchmark, we will be confident in setting timelines. However, the preparedness and safety guidelines, as you might have noticed, if you're living, say, in this region of North America over the last 9 months, it can be a moving target in terms of getting verifiable information. And so in terms of talking about safety, preparedness, staffing, and our learning environment, I'm confident that we'll be able to find those criteria for benchmarks, but we're not confident yet about the timeline for that. And so just to point that out. And then also, I suppose I want to emphasize the takeaways from last week, just in case you didn't tune in and you aren't sure what we talked about, and you're just, this is your Tuesday evening or your podcast listen, and you just like the sound of Holly's voice and mine. Well, hello, good evening. Last week we said the 4 takeaways from our work over the winter break, and taking all of the survey data in from our staff and from our families, was this: that we're staying in distance learning in our elementary. Specifically, and at least we said last week through February 24th. Also, we recommitted to our 6-week lead time for large model changes. So if we're going to really change the model that we're using, we're going to let everyone know 6 weeks ahead of time, so there's predictability into what we can anticipate. And then we are currently assessing our criteria and setting those benchmarks. And we have, though, committed to expanding our lower elementary Student Resource Center for in-person activity on campus, so in-person learners, as soon as we can staff that model. We've already started hiring staff. We need to hire a few more staff, and so that job is posted widely. It's on our school website, and so help us find the staff that will serve our students really well, and just let everyone know about this. And so those are the 4 immediate actions that we have, and then as we establish again those benchmarks, we'll let you know. And so that's the summary for school operation amidst the pandemic. However, there's a couple more things. So Holly, I'll stop screen sharing just to keep this presentation a little dynamic.
Okay.
And I'll say I received 2 questions. I'm going to put them in the. Can I put them in the Q&A? I can't. Mm-hmm. Host can't put them in the Q&A. So here I received 2 questions.
Put them in the chat.
I will. I'll put them in the chat, and so I'll put them in the chat also so that everyone who's here live can see it. Let me just change this chat, panelists and attendees. So question number 1 that came in was specifically, can you reiterate the school's response and actions last week after the Capitol insurrection? So that was the language used in the question. I'll just quote it. And I'm prepared to do that. Holly, did you see any questions come through the office email?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, not through the
or
office
anywhere
email, but there's a Q&A. There's a Q&A.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Katie
Good.
put one in.
Okay. And then the second question that I received a similar question from two different folks, which was, can you talk about the, I think, perspective. This is the language I see in the email that I have pulled up here. Prospective employees, what are their options this year? And do people have to work if they're not comfortable? And what I read into that question was specifically about probably coming in on site, not, before the pandemic, that question of do you have to work if you're not comfortable was a little less understandable. So I'm making some assumptions about that question. It's not qualified. But that actually came through a not often used, but always available option, which is on our Great River School website. I'll try something in a moment, Holly. I'll try live navigating our website. On our website, on all of the contact us pages, I've made sure to go through with this and really highlight it on all the contact us pages. There's always an option for anonymous feedback. So you can say, I'd like to speak up. And it goes to us by email, but does not have any indicator from the sender who it is. It can be very useful for students. It can be useful for folks who are in something of a tenuous situation and perhaps don't want to have themselves identified. But that's always available on our website. And there's, I suppose, somewhat of a second relationship question to that one about employees that I received by email, which was, can you address the high turnover rate of teachers? That I asked for some clarification, but what I thought would be maybe useful was to talk over our public reporting, where and how our public reporting is done, and then show the data that we have about our mobility for employees year to year. I put together the past 6 years, and then compare that to some of the both local and national data. So I got to say, for tonight, I'm really excited to actually have some direction from these questions, and I was able to prepare a little bit. Holly, anything else besides Q&A and those questions that is coming up?
I'm sorry, nothing else.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's enough.
Okay.
Okay. So just I suppose to start, I'll mention a feature of our website. There we go. I've noticed that in my public speaking, one habit that comes back while I am navigating the computer and speaking is the filler syllables. And I notice that I make those filler syllables when the navigation is occurring. So if I'm moving the mouse, it's really, you all are just getting an insight that maybe you don't want about my work with computers, which is I often make sound effects when I'm moving the mouse around the screen.
Could you make dog barks?
I haven't in the past, and I won't start publicly now, but probably now I'm going to try it.
Okay.
Like growls, you mean?
No, I just like woof, and little tiny like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, up here, my own family, the youngest members of my family, have their first formal employment as a group. They are caring for sled dogs, which is less exciting than it sounds because it has to do with what goes in and what comes out. Basically, 3 times a week, 2 or 3 times a week. Anyway,
that's amazing.
So all the noises, right? The canine noises I would be making would be very rowdy.
Yeah.
Would be, sort of a crowd of athletic dogs rowdy.
That would be fun. Yeah.
So just trying to spice it up for anyone listening, and I am going to answer questions for anyone who's in a hurry. It's 6:21. We'll be through content by 6:32. Here we go. So first, I just want to remind folks of a couple resources. Holly, when I go up here under current families and I click there, it goes straight to our announcement blog, which is good to know.
Yeah,
Can you see my navigation? Can you see the drop-down screen?
I can. I like the Spiritware
Okay, good.
store.
Oh, I know, right? So this is not an advertisement, though, yet. Maybe
No.
later it will become one. I just want to point out that we put the Thursday Family Newsletter here every Thursday when we send it out, and that my head of school message last week really echoed important work that I can't take the lead in taking credit for, but our program directors and guides and some other really talented put together a lot of resources for all teachers to use last Thursday morning. And last Thursday morning, the day after violence at the capital of our nation, and specifically symbols of white supremacy, an immediate noticing in the news, especially after the uprising and protests for racial justice last spring and over the summer, a real noticing among our staff and I believe our students at the difference in perceived actions on the part of law enforcement that day. And so even before Thursday morning, I would say a really robust and involved dialogue among students, staff. And I didn't hear from families, but I'm not on the inside of your family dialogue, but about, you know, what does this mean for the place we live? And so specifically, I just wanted to let all families know that I believe that our imperfect action, reaction, preparation for the next day does identify a lot about where we are as a school, where we aspire to be as a school, and then specifically where we focused and how we addressed the issues that very next morning. And so this, though, I think is consistent. And when I say imperfect, I just want to identify that, especially in talking about current events, and in particular in talking about race and racial justice, there's a lot of growth that we have to do as a school, that education in general in Minnesota has to do, but I don't want to deflect our responsibilities. And so just to identify that, what we addressed as a staff the next day, what I saw is a focus on directly addressing racism and the violence present on the federal place where the people's representatives gather to vote and act peacefully. That violent interruption was done by a conspicuously mostly white group carrying signs of racial injustice oppression in the form at least of the Confederate flag, if not many other symbols that connote racism. And so I wanted to address that. We talk about that with all ages at the school, really in line with our mission to prepare students for their unique roles as responsible and engaged citizens. So to be able to be engaged and to be able to respond as our definition of responsible. So using an appropriate language and approach, an age-appropriate language to talk about that. Generally, that starts with a formula as simple as saying, students, what did you notice? What do you see? What do you wonder about? And letting the students' questions both lead the teacher in terms of that day's conversation, but also set a framework for where a guide or an educator can go in terms of giving students a scaffold to understand what they're seeing. And for some students at any age, that is, I'm not ready to engage in this, or I didn't see much. And for some students, they want to process a lot. So using, say, breakout rooms and choices for students who have different identities, different positionality in terms of their personal positions, seeing what's happening. Some students want to talk right away and some don't. So that's also the appropriate approach that we're talking about. So in offering a space for students to process, our social work team is one element of that. And then I also linked a general slideshow. So if you are interested in what we did, how we did it, I'm not going to go into it more tonight, but I just wanted to identify for folks where that public information is. And so as I scroll back up, I want to also make sure that you see, under current families, there are a lot of resources. So family resources, the Spiritware store, parent engagement group, there's a lot of forms. But if you also go over to the section that says contact us, if I just click there, it opens up with a picture of our director of first impressions, Holly Bell. Do you see it, Holly? Is it there?
I see it.
Okay, good. And on all of our contact us pages, so you can find a staff listing, but I'm going to scroll down to the share anonymous feedback here. So this is a place where anyone can always share feedback anonymously. And then we also, of course, have the weekly family survey where it's an option to be anonymous, and then you can leave your email if you want follow-up. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about was how we are a public school, and that means all of our decision-making, all of our budgeting, all of our spending is all a public process. And specifically, for those of you who have engaged with the school board, for those of you engaged with the school board, you know that the school board engagement is not high. It's not uniquely low at our school. And so if you want to read, I won't go on a huge diversion, but the idea of social capital, I'd say maybe about 20 years ago, there's a book called Bowling Alone, where it talked about engagement in civic organization has declined greatly over the last 40 to 60 years in the United States especially, but North America generally. That means that we have less involvement in our public processes and therefore often less trust in our public institutions. So we are not unique. We're a public institution, and I do recognize that when and if there's less engagement, often it takes a crisis or something really harrowing to get people to engage. So I'm going to call on us maybe to engage now in the school and really understanding how the school board works. So I clicked on the About GRS page under Board Policies, Plans, and Handbooks. And here you can see a lot about our board. So our committee agendas meet monthly, and those are open meetings. All the board documents are available to the public here, and you can attend a board meeting. Every board meeting has a public comment section at the beginning. And then the board really functionally, I just want to identify, is here to operate the school through governance. So to tell me as the lead administrator and the school what are our boundaries for operating. And so that is the place where decisions are made. I think I joked a couple weeks ago, or maybe just last week, about this isn't a monarchy. I will identify that if we don't have public engagement with our school board, if we don't have a robust discussion, if we don't allow ourselves the honest, frankly, joy of disagreeing and still caring about each other after disagreeing, this place will seem like a monarchy, and I don't think will reflect the values that our mission states or that many folks who are at the school want. And so we need the public to engage to remain really engaged with public institutions. So off my soapbox about public institutions, and I did mention the announcement blog, so there's item number 2. And so here we go. Holly, should we start with the Q&A? I think we should, and then we'll go to the questions that were emailed to me. Okay, great. Will you read that out?
Yes, Katie writes in and says, I've seen a little bit in the news about school districts noticing learning loss, in quotes, this year. What are you observing about the levels of learning at GRS? How worried are you that students are not getting what they need this year? And how would a quote unquote learning loss affect GRS in the future?
Sure. So three quick points that I'll open with, and then I'll explain a little bit about each chapter. But one would be, I've been saying in general, and I said this past summer, please, as adults in the lives of children, let's emphasize that children have whole lives to live, that the function of their childhood is not just to leverage right now to be the best reader, to get into the best college, to get the best employment, right? So there's real economic myopia, like to define that, for those of you who don't want to go look up what the heck I'm talking about, there's a real overemphasis, I feel often, on the safety of students in direct relationship to their performance at school. And so if you think I have to be a good reader in order to be okay in the future, you're going to have a harder time reading. And so I'm using poor grammar to define that on purpose, to identify that reading well often comes when you trust that you can overcome a challenge, when you have people who care about you around you. Those people could be your age or a little older or even a little younger. And that when you work through that challenge together, that experience of how you learn to read often reflects how you work through many other problems also. So I'm taking a very young sort of example, but let's say for 8th or 9th year students who are going through a large period of transition this past 9 months, years, the 7th grade through 10th grade journey is in Montessori terms often compared to, what a newborn would undergo through toddlerhood. It's a phase of drastic development and reorganization of identity. So I think about those students especially too. And I realize I'm explaining after I said I'd do 3 quick things. 1, don't worry about it. I'm just jumping back to what I promised. 1, don't worry about it. Just keep it in mind, right? 2, it's a time for development, even if we're not in school doing the thing we expected to do right now. And 3 would be, we have it in mind that most students are with us over a long period of time. So I'll jump back now. Thank you for, someone can go edit this later. I'll jump back now to the middle of my second point, which is development is happening now. Development's happening whether we are in school traditionally doing the things we intended to do when we opened this school as a Montessori environment. And so learning loss is something that I think is defined by the idea that learning gain was only if a student does X, Y, Z better at the end of this year than they did at the start. And that is a perspective that people hold. It is not the perspective that's the driving force, animus, or fuel of our school, which is a vision of world peace through education and a mission of preparing students for their unique roles as responsible and engaged citizens. So I think I said over the summer, just to maybe get on the third point of we have it in mind. I said this summer, hey, adults, let's just imagine that this isn't a horrible crisis. Let's imagine that our children are on board a train with us and the train has slowed down. And if we all act like the slowing down of the train is somehow going to permanently ruin the life quality of our children's lives, then this crisis will at the least become bigger than it is, right? So as adults, let's play the adult role of understanding that it's not what we expected, but life isn't a fast food order menu. And sometimes what we didn't expect is going to teach us things that we can't predict, right? That's a holistic view. And I will say as educators, especially as educators who understand that the state mandates us to teach literacy skills, to teach numeracy skills, to engage in, especially at our school, teaching our students how to ask questions, answer them, and research them. We recognize, especially for our youngest learners right now, that we're going to have a different job ahead of us when we can be in person with lower L especially than we would have without this pandemic. The gracious thing about Montessori education is that it's based in the experience of the learner with concrete materials and then engaging with their community. And so we're trying to do our best at that right now, but I would really avoid as a parent and an educator using the words learning loss. That might have been my timer, Holly. Good. Okay, so. So, and specifically, I would talk about how we as educators are preparing and looking at how are we going to have to change our behaviors when we have students in person again. I've specifically seen educators preparing how will we have to assess students where they're at differently, right? We can't just operate under the same assumptions that what we were doing before the pandemic will just continue. And then I would also say there are going to be things that students know how to do, expect from each other, and expect from their teachers that is completely different and never would have happened without this pandemic. That might include how they cook at home, how they have to care for their family at home, how they expect their teachers to be available or not by video, or any number of things. And so really when I hear the term learning loss, and for the person who asked this question, I don't think it's specifically, I don't specifically pigeonhole you as being full of anxiety about it, but I want to identify that world peace through education and preparing students for their roles as engaged citizens means that they have to have skills to engage in the world, but we shouldn't overemphasize the idea that they didn't learn something now and that somehow we're all in dire trouble because of this. I think that one of the concerns, though, is about literacy and independence in learning, especially with youngest students who perhaps aren't functionally independently fluent in reading or reading aloud or reading for comprehension. And so that would be where the educational focus is. And my human focus is that adults, please let's act, talk, speak, and look like we understand that there's a valuable person who, even if they aren't in school right now, isn't somehow going to be less valuable than somebody who didn't get their 3rd grade or 9th grade or 11th grade interrupted by a pandemic. And that is my real concern, is that 5 years, 7 years, 12 years from now, a 3rd, 9th, or 12th grader or 11th grader who had their year interrupted would somehow participate personally in the idea that my learning was lost and now I can't function as well because it was. I think that is not that's not a responsible and engaged citizen. And so I probably said too much, but I think it's a real thing that educators should be thinking about. And I look forward to a day when society sees school as a vehicle for preparing to do well in the world, and that means more than economic independence. So that's where I think learning loss comes in. All right, I don't see other Q&As. So Holly, what do you think about reading question number 1 in the chat?
Yes, question number 1. Can you reiterate the school's response and action last week after the Capitol insurrection?
I can, and in fact, I will. I showed a little bit of where you all can find it in the announcements blog if you want to look deeply into it. But I also just want to identify that I speak for at least the spirit of where our school aspires to go when we prepare our curriculum, or when we talk about celebrating the beauty of our Black students, or Indigenous students, or our Latinx students, or any of our students who are in school who have experienced some kind of slight or oppression because of their identity in the world. When I say what happened last week was not a surprise if we understand the history of this nation and our struggle to be an inclusive multiracial democracy. And so we generally have done professional development and thinking about how to have that discussion and teach it. And so I would say that's where the school's responses and actions generally came from. And the idea that our students are prepared for the world would have to do with understanding that there are patterns to what happened last week. This is not a podcast or a video about it, but I did receive a couple notices, say from families who were interested in understanding more of the rationale for why we approach it the way we did. And so I will say, I think there are ways we can improve. So I want to hear from folks where we can. And I think that's my summary of the rationale for how we approached that moment. I would also identify that our students, especially our students as they become lower adolescents and move to upper adolescence, really are demanding better of the world. And I would say, whether it's global warming or how we treat each other, or racial injustice, or a term like white supremacy and how to understand it and actively make the world a better place by deconstructing it every day, that those ideas are going to be an indelible part of every person's experience in the world, especially if they're right now ages 6 to 18, and understanding how to engage in a world meaningfully with this as the current context. Like I guess I would say what we're experiencing right now, because of global warming, because of how polarized politically our country is probably the kinds of challenges that we have to prepare our students to engage with. And so it may get calmer, it may get less disrupted than this, it may get less calm and more disrupted than this, especially in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. So I'm really proud, though, of the way that our adolescent students press us as adults to speak clearer and do better around issues of racial injustice, political injustice, environmental injustice, et cetera, et cetera. So, Holly, how about number 2?
Well, I'm interested, excuse me, in this one. Can you talk about the perspective of employees? What are their options this year? Do people have to work if they aren't comfortable?
Okay. Well, so I'll start with just identifying one. I would say if I were an employee, I would be somewhat reticent about the person who holds the, quote, in charge position representing the perspective of employees. So I welcome that to be a preface, that I'm not speaking for employees currently, but I do want, in all transparency possible, to show what employees have seen and to describe, and I'll show a summary of a graph that we showed last week from the survey we took among employees. But I can't speak for employees because I'm often counted as the person in charge, and often I'm talking with the full awareness that being in charge is often somewhat suspicious, right? So, as the in charge person, can you trust what I'm saying? As one of my own children pointed out, it doesn't seem like people who are in charge often say the whole truth or tell the truth. Is that true? Right. So, like in relation to current events or what's on the news or any of that stuff. And so I'll just share. I'm fully aware of that. So one, I will also share. I'm going to do my best to tell the whole truth and identify some places that are really difficult this year. So this is an image to explain the four sort of main areas employees were presented with at the beginning of the year in terms of resources for working during the pandemic. So this is the employee decision tree at the bottom, but there are Department of Health decision trees about if you're infected or exposed. There's the American with Disabilities Act Employment Protection Law, and then there's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is a law that, to my understanding, expired on 12/31/2020, was re-upped late in the year, and so extended through March 31st, 2021. And this month, at this month's board meeting, I and our HR manager will bring a proposal that the school actually honor the terms of the Coronavirus Relief Act leave through the end of this school year for our employees independently, just to choose to do that as employers. So you can look those up. Employees were offered this image and the links to those items. We asked employees to identify three categories, themselves within three categories, and one was a condition the CDC considers medically at high risk. And so we listed those and asked employees to work with our HR manager and their supervisor to make sure that if they are in that category, we know that. The second category would be not being personally medically at risk, but having a dependent who is. And then third, being not medically at risk. Now, I just want to say forthrightly here, none of these are interpreted to mean you're not terrified, anxious, or nervous about how do we be safe with each other when all I've heard since March is don't be inside with people that you aren't in the same household as. And working in education, I think, is particularly almost intractably linked to being inside with kids who carry a lot of germs, right? And so I think it is a terrifying thing to be an educator right now. And on top of that, we proceed mandated by the state and by our own expectations and by families and children, sort of amid a current of anxiety. And so I just want to say, these are meant as a framework for understanding what we have to do, not to mean if you're not medically at risk, we think that you have no reticence, no withholding, no anxiety. And so as I scroll down, this is the decision tree that faculty were provided with as a way to try to put into perspective how to make a decision about either coming in person to work or not. And specifically, I just want to identify that if we had the ability, if we had the financial means as an organization to say to all our cared for and current employees, do what you're most comfortable with and we'll make it work, then I would proceed that way. That would be my recommendation to the school board. I don't believe that we do have the resources to do that. And that if in all honesty, just folks who wanted to come in came in person, and folks who didn't want to didn't come in, it would be a somewhat frankly chaotic mix of how to figure out how to staff the positions we need to staff. And it doesn't have a way to apply that need to the number of students coming in on site, to how we do this work. And so I am, however, open to that debate. In terms of how this decision tree works, though, faculty are invited to follow the decision tree through some questions about if you're medically at risk, then you will perform your role virtually. And if your duties cannot be performed virtually, then we will give you assigned duties. Any employee can find their way to take a chosen leave of absence and then have their job when they want to come back. And frankly, that is one option for psychological freedom, to be able to say, I love my job, but I can't even engage with this process right now. It is not a veiled threat on the part of the school. It is a reality, though, that we do have things we have to do, and to carry those things out, at least at this point, some folks do have to be in person, and I'm quite sure that that causes some folks anxiety, and we are doing everything we can as an organization with our limited means, abilities, and provided parameters by the state and our finances to really be as human as possible in making decisions with people. That doesn't mean I think we're always succeeding at our best, but that's what we're aspiring for. So I think I tried, Holly.
You did.
I hope I covered it. Okay, thanks.
There's a part B.
Okay, all right. Address the high turnover rate of teachers. Well, now, I'm not sure exactly where this question came from, but having received it from a couple places, you all let me know where this question might be coming from. I'll identify this. One, I put together a little table. Holly, is it legible?
Yes, you might enlarge it a tiny bit.
Okay, great, I will. Thank you for your help.
Yes. Oh, that's
a little better. Okay, great. I might go too big. Is that too big?
That's too big. It cuts off the bottom.
Okay. Okay, good. Whew. All right.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening along, what I'm showing right now is a chart, and you can come to the video later and see this. I believe we're probably at about minute 47 or 48 of tonight's talk. And this is a chart that shows at Great River School over the past, I believe 7, 8 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 school years. In terms of our licensed teachers, how many from one year to another did not return to Great River School, and for all positions, so including educational assistants, non-licensed staff, we're even part-time or aftercare staff at this point are included in this number. So we showed those turnover percentages, and over on the far right side, I put an organizational note. From a low number of 6.25% from 15-16 to 16-17 to a high number of 20%, just over 20% back in 14-15 to 15-16. We show right now between the school years how many teachers don't return to Great River School in this licensed teacher category. So I showed the average here over these past 8 school years. In both the licensed teacher and all position turnover. And then I made some notes. And so just for those of you who haven't been with the school, say for 8 years, which would be few, most of the families at Great River School have joined sometime in the last 2.5 years, I believe. I took over as head of school in April of 2014. And so there was a rather high turnover rate, especially compared to the following year, especially among teachers. There was some reorganization. We reviewed some programs, and we did make some changes in terms of either what teaching positions we were investing in or who was filling those positions. So I'll just say that was on me that first year. Secondly, though, from 2015 through 2021 here, you'll notice that it was in the spring of 2015 that we had done a lot of research, and we applied for a school expansion grant in order to both secure our campus, expand our facility, and really expand our elementary school to stabilize our school. And when we did that, we looked to move from the 53 employees we had at that year over a 3-year period to more than double our organization. And so as we did that, most organizational management changes and books about organizational management and change would identify that that's likely to increase the turnover rate. Something that I see is that our turnover rate actually stayed about average for those 3 years of expansion. And then last year, from 2019-20 to this year, we had our first year of stable operation after doubling. And so Some folks left to pursue other teaching jobs other places. Specifically, some folks, after that school expansion, either their role or their job or what was asked of them had changed pretty dramatically over the either 2 or 4 years that they had been at the school. And so in that turnover, it is a little higher than it's been for a few years. But I wanted to identify, I suppose, that when we look at both the Minnesota and national teacher turnover rate there, I'll show some graphs in a moment. There's a category of people who are moving, called movers, and a category of people who are leaving the profession, called leavers. And so here are the rates. These are in our annual reports that we put forward each year. And anyone who wants this table, let us know and we can post it. As I scroll down here, though, we've sourced these turnover rates. It's somewhat difficult to find an annual measure, but as I go down, I will identify that specifically, not only are a large number of teachers in Minnesota leaving their jobs completely, leaving the profession completely, but that has risen from under just around 8% back in 2009-10 to just over 11 or 12%. Oh, sorry, just over 11%, near 12% in 2017-18. And so as I go down here and show leavers versus movers, again, you'll see most of the folks who leave Great River School that I showed on that table up above, they do generally move to a different educational job. Generally, they aren't leaving the profession of teaching. I would say that specifically, though, is very, and this is over a long period of time, this graph you can see. So this is a national graph. And then down here, one thing to keep in mind, though, is that when I show our Great River turnover rates, and they seem to be about comparable with either national or Minnesota state averages, note that the national and state averages are predominantly conventional schools and school districts. So union jobs that are frankly different, more stable, and pay more than charter school jobs. And that charter schools are either usually startups, so they're very dynamic, but very new, and really take a lot of investment from the people who work there, startups, or they're managed from the outside, or like us, we're not a startup anymore, we're self-managed. And all those charter schools put together, the average turnover rate is 5 to 10% higher in any given state, and nationally it is around 25%. So when you look up here where I started, Holly, when I scroll, do you see the scrolling?
I do.
Oh, great, good. So right here, our average, especially last year, is higher than our national turnover rate, and specifically is just over the Minnesota turnover rate. And I would say we have many fewer people leaving the profession altogether when they leave Great River School. They're often going to a higher paying teaching job at a different location. And so you might say, why don't we pay our teachers more? And I will identify, we want to pay our teachers more. And in terms of charter schools, we're paying our teachers slightly above what an average charter school pays. And however, that is a dismal amount. And teachers from union jobs who are making 20, 30, 40% more than our teachers are making, I don't believe our society is valuing them enough either. So it is a problem, and it needs to be addressed on a systemic, institutional, statewide, and regional level. And one of the reasons, say, we expanded our school and are looking to really build our finances and our savings is so that our school board can take all the money possible in a given year and put it into giving teachers raises. At this point, we have to build up our financial reserves before we can do that in terms of raising teacher pay meaningfully. Or we need to find a different funding source. And so we're actually looking for that, but it's a large scale problem that affects all charters. So just again, notice most charters have a higher turnover rate than we currently have. We are at about what the average turnover rate for all schools nationally is. And I don't believe that's good, but it's a baseline where we are about average. Specifically, I just wanted to show this. One of the best reports is the Learning Policy Institute in their report on teacher turnover. Learning Policy Institute has very thorough data and sometimes a variety of perspectives in their studies. But one figure that I thought was useful is reported here. And again, it is from 2012-13, so I would be interested in more recent data on this. But teachers report leaving their job here for these following reasons as rated. So the lowest is called financial, or pursue another job, retirement, personal reasons, or dissatisfaction. I would identify, generally, I would say this table is inverse for Great River School. So most of the folks who leave our school generally are leaving for financial reasons. Not to say folks don't leave dissatisfied or for personal reasons or retirement or to pursue another job, but I would say generally the most folks who choose to leave Great River School are leaving because it was a financial reality either for their family or their self. They needed at least that higher pay available at other school districts, conventional districts. So the summary here, I suppose, would be I'm really open to having a conversation about teacher retention, support, celebration. Support is, I think, key. Not a lot of folks are making the decision to stay in education because of financial reasons. Some folks have to leave, especially Great River School, because of financial requirements on their life or their children or their family. And support is often felt by teachers from the way families engage with them, thank them and show gratitude for them and recognize what they do, the way that students do the same, and hopefully the way that the school is able to do that. This is a very difficult year, and is a particularly difficult year for a school whose resources are often tight anyway, to look at meaningful ways to really support teachers. And so in terms of mental health needs, needs for meaningful compensation, recognition, and to be heard, I want to work before my departure as head of school to make it really clear how decisions are made, how teacher voice is part of a process. And so after next week we're going to talk about equity and wellness at Great River School, and where those educational equity surveys that we all engaged in last November, December, where we're going with those. But 2 weeks from today, I'll just do a little rundown of how does the school board work, who's on the school board, and why and how is our school board meaningfully different from other school boards. So if you do have questions, though, that are meaningful like this about teacher turnover or anything else important, please speak up and let us know. Okay. Oh, one last question. Holly, will you ask this question? We'll close out with it.
Okay. Let me go to the chat. Oh, sorry, I was in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm doing there. Okay.
I think it's about evergreen trees.
I see it. It seems to have.
Oh, you answered it. There you go.
Here's a question.
So, Holly, should we bring in our evergreen trees this year to feed the goats?
Oh, thank you for thinking of us and our goats. But sadly, the goats are still at the farm because of the way the school year is with the pandemic. And so, no, I'm sorry, you'll have to recycle your Christmas trees, evergreen trees in a different way this year. But next year, next year.
It's next year though too.
Hopefully.
Thank you everybody who showed up. Thank you for everybody who listened. Please let us know your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. I think, especially as the year has gone on, I will note, I think probably the most honest and volatile questions have sometimes been missing from these dialogues. So if you've got a question you think is maybe a little rude or to the point too quickly, that would be a perfect question for here. So we want to know.
There's one
if you, say if you're an employee who's watching this and you think something was not represented correctly or accurately, I also want to know that. We want to be, I would say, corrective and learning oriented in how we're addressing information. So critical feedback is welcome. I mean, compliments are also welcome, but really engagement is what we're going to need to keep this place the living, breathing entity that it is. So thank you. Thank you, Holly.
Wait, Sam. There's one.
Okay, great.
When we go back to in-person, will the schedule go back to the original school day schedule?
I can with 80% certainty say no, that we would likely keep the current schedule, and even further say one decision is that our in-person instruction will have to address how teachers keep connected to distance learners, because no matter what, I'm confident that when we go back in person, a meaningful number of our students will need to stay in distance learning for either their personal medical needs or their family's medical security. And so, no, we wouldn't go back to the 8:30 to 3:10 school day that you would have expected, in January 2020. So that's what I can say. But what I can also say, though, is that if your family schedule needs something to adjust, please let us know what it is so we can see what we can offer to meet your needs.
But perhaps in 21, 22, question mark?
I would say in 21, 22, it will probably not be exactly the same as it is now, but I wouldn't assume that it would just be 8:30 to 3:10 and we know it's taken care of. I think we've even learned some things about adolescent schedules, elementary schedules, student needs. Not that there's been learning loss, but I think how we engage in learning is going to be affected by how we're learning now. And so we can preview that, though, I think, in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. We'll see you all here next week to talk about educational equity. Great.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Bye, kitty cat. Meow.